Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge and our continuing World in Flames Days of Decision combined campaign playthrough. We've reached July-August 1939. Last turn in May-June we saw a very dramatic victory for Franco and his Spanish nationalists east of Madrid. It forced the surviving Republican troops to kind of retreat back into Madrid and down towards Valencia. So they have definitely managed to break open that stalemate in the eastern part of the country. However, this turn, the Republicans are scheduled to receive a number of good reinforcements. The question is, are they arriving too late, and will they be enough to turn the tide? Let's go ahead and find out. Well, another sign that war is approaching is the fact that when looking at the current financial status of all the major powers, every single one of them is running a deficit right now. The Soviet Union and Germany are running a deficit of -1, and everyone else is deeper in the hole than they are, with the United States bringing up the last position in debt to the tune of -10. So with that in mind, there's not a lot of bidding that has gone on here for political options this turn. I think a lot of the countries are either focusing on trying to get out of debt and or build up or accelerate the buildup of their forces on the map. So with that, we've got the Commonwealth, the USSR, and Italy being the only three powers that bid anything. And even then, none of them really have a lot to work with, so these are fairly low bids. The Commonwealth bid 2, actually. When you add the +2 for their initiative position from last turn, that gives them a grand total of 4. The Italians, just ahead of them, bid 1. They get a +3, which also gives them a 4. However, when we look over here at the political effectiveness track, you can see the Commonwealth now has the highest political effectiveness of all of the major powers, easily breaking the tie with the Italians down here, which means the Commonwealth is actually going to end up in the first position this turn, followed by the Italians in second, and then the lone remaining bidder was the USSR, which also bid 1. Now they got +0, but because the other 5 major powers decided not to bid, that's going to jump them all the way up to third here, and then the last card marker will come down here. Now, among the remaining 5 that did not bid, we have the United States here. By virtue of the +4 for the bid modifier, it's going to drop down to 4th, followed by Germany at +3 here. And then you'll see Japan with +2 is going to slip 1 spot down to 6th. And then we have France and China both ending up tying with a modified 1. However, as you can see, China's political effectiveness being the worst, she's going to lose that tie. So France is going to stay in 7th and China is going to drop back down to 8th, where she has been for most of the game. I think she and the United States have probably spent more time down in the 8th position than all the other major powers combined. So we've got 3 potential political options to play out this phase. We're going to start with the Commonwealth. We'll see what they were bidding 2 to try to do. The Commonwealth is going to choose to play IPO 2, Minor Economic Agreement, as we see here. Now, one of the reasons the Commonwealth bid 2 for initiative position is that it was important for the Commonwealth for a couple of reasons to get that low initiative position. First, as you recall, an IPO may only be played by a single major power per political phase. So in other words, you cannot have the Commonwealth and, say, the United States both play minor economic agreement in the same turn. So the Commonwealth did not want to get edged out of being able to play this minor economic agreement by having another major power go in front of her and then play this option on them and sort of kind of wasting or blowing up their political plans for the turn. The other reason they bid 2 to try to assure that they went very early in the political phase is that the country they're going to sign the minor economic agreement with is Poland. Now, Poland has a willpower of 2, and you can see here that to make an economic agreement, the major power's initiative must be less than or equal to the minor's willpower. So the Commonwealth needed to make sure, or at least try to get into either the first or second initiative position this turn. Now, fortunately, with the bonus or the bid modifier from her position last turn. That too, given the fact that there weren't very many bidders, given the overall financial situation of the major powers, did assure the Commonwealth of getting that low position she was looking for. So she'll have no problem playing this and making it successful here with Poland. She is going to opt to sign the economic agreement. She has the option of Poland has three red factories and 2 resources that are available. So the Commonwealth could either sign an agreement to get the use of one of the red factories or 1 or 2 of the resources. She's leaning towards gaining control of one of the resources, and if we go the resources route, she might. She has the option of getting control of 2 resources. However, this is not a cheap option, as we've seen before. It's going to cost the Commonwealth 4 money. If we sign the agreement for 2 resources, that's going to cost the Commonwealth 8. Now, having just paid for the political bid, the initiative bid, she's sitting at -5 right now. So were we to try to grab both of those resources in Poland, that is going to drop her down to -13. She is producing, I think, 11 or 12 perhaps build points per turn now. She's got a pretty good production. The question is, does she want to go that deep in the hole, which may either impact her builds this turn and maybe the next turn, or she'll end up remaining in deficit longer than they would like. I think, though, because of what the Commonwealth has in mind, they will go ahead and sign this agreement for both of the resources in Poland. So it is going to cost 8 money to the UK. You can see, or I'm sorry, the Commonwealth. You can see. Poland will have a +1. There'll be no U.S. entry effects and really no other minor effects on this. Then we'll have to go over to the board and activate some minor country somewhere. So let me go ahead and pay for this on the track, and we will place the control marker in Poland, and then we'll see what the Commonwealth decides to do as far as activating a country. I know a lot of you may be scratching your heads about why the Commonwealth, particularly at this point in the game, would spend so much to sign an economic agreement with Poland, of all countries, that wouldn't appear on the surface to be of all that much use to the Commonwealth. However, the Foreign Office has assured me that there is some method in this madness, if you will. The current influence that the Commonwealth has in Poland now, thanks to the +1 there, is increased to +5. You can see France here has a +3, and the Soviet Union is sitting at a -2. Now this, I think you will see as things unfold over the next several turns, is probably part of a deeper political strategy on the part of the Commonwealth and likely France as well. So we will, looking around the rest of the board at the other minor countries, Poland does actually make the most sense for the Commonwealth to activate. It's a best case scenario by far. So the Commonwealth will be activating Poland, which means we need to go over to the status display and resolve the control markers here and see if the Poles are going to edge a little bit closer to the Commonwealth as a result of this economic agreement. Here we see the status display. You'll find Poland's marker located here in the neutral zone, just barely halfway between the UK and Germany. We have our 3 control markers here. Now this should be a fairly interesting resolution. What we're going to do is we're going to resolve this French +3 first. Now that means the marker is going to move towards the French marker located up here. The movement cost is 2 per hex normally. However, there is a +1 when you're moving away from any allied major power. And remember that Poland is currently allied to Germany and has been so since the setup of the game. So from the start of the game, Germany and Poland have an alliance, as do France and Poland. what the effect of that is, that's going to increase the cost to move just a 1 hex here, normally from 2 to 3, but we do have 3 with the French here, which is going to be enough to move Poland to this hex here. Now, we're going to go ahead and resolve the 5 Commonwealth influence. So again, it's normally 2 to move a hex. We're going to have +1 because they're moving away from Germany with whom they are allied, so it's going to cost 3. But we are also crossing a boundary in order to move into one of these 2 hexes, which is going to add yet another one. So it's a total cost of 4 here to move the marker. And as you can see, this +5 is going to get the job done. Now, it's unfortunate that one of the influence is wasted, but the Commonwealth has now successfully managed to draw Poland into the Democrat ideology, and this is going to have some repercussions further down the line. And we are still not done yet with the control marker resolution. We have -2 for the Soviet Union, which is going to push Poland away from the Soviets, which will slide Poland 1 hex here to China. It only costs 2 because the marker is not moving further away from, well, actually it is moving further away from France here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I believe it would cost 2 normally, and then 3 to move away from the major power she's allied with. She would not be moving any further away from Germany. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 8. So thanks to the alliance with France, that's going to keep Poland right where she is with the -2 influence from the Soviet Union. So now you can see Poland is just now into the Democrat ideology, only 1 hex away from the Commonwealth. So if the Commonwealth can continue to apply some political effort on Poland, they may be able to get the Polish marker stacked with them, thus allowing Poland to potentially be brought in as an active participant in any war between the Commonwealth and France, or Commonwealth and Germany, or Commonwealth and Italy, or even Commonwealth and Japan for that matter. So I think a surprisingly good turn for the Commonwealth. They've got to be happy with the developments, particularly here with regards to Poland. And now we have to see if the turn, or the political phase, is going to end. And since there were no political options chosen prior to this, there is no modifier to the die roll, which means we need a 1 to end the political phase. Otherwise, we're going to see what the Italians have in mind. So here we go. And it is a 10, which means the political phase continues. Now we'll see what the Italians were bidding for. The Italians are going to choose to do IPO 8 rebel support. Now, I think a very good argument can be made that the Italians basically caused the civil war in Spain that's been going on now for 2+ years. But they've been pretty lackluster in their support of the nationalist rebels. So the Italians have kind of got to decide if they're going to go all in on this civil war or not. And it may be too late because, again, the war has been raging for quite a while now. And in order to maximize the benefit to Italy, Italy needed the war to end as quickly as possible. So we'll see if and when this war wraps up. But the Italians, it looks like, have decided to try to nudge the nationalists over the finish line here, particularly with the success that the nationalists had last turn. They've sort of broken that stalemate in the east. I think the Italians now see an opportunity to maybe pile on and help the nationalists try to sustain that momentum, particularly with the Republicans looking to get a number of reinforcements this turn. So with that, they're going to have to pay 2 money here. That's going to drop them, along with the 1 that they bid, down to -7 currently, leaving not a lot for them to build with here this turn. And again, with this option, they will have to spend at least 1 build point building Spanish nationalist troops and equipment. Now, because of their position as second in the initiative order, they can spend up to 7 build points on nationalist units. The one issue is currently there are no national units in the force pool to build or rebuild, but knowing that they've got potentially some substantial Italian monetary support coming this turn, it may make the Nationalists a little more willing to make some lower odds attacks, being able to accept losses that maybe they normally wouldn't, knowing that they are going to be in a better position to rebuild any losses they sustain this turn thanks to the Italians. And it also allows the Italians, if they desire to basically lend a unit on the map to the Nationalists for the prosecution of the war here. And I think that may be more so than the build points that they can spend on the Nationalists. I think it's more about getting the Nationalists some additional troops to try to wrap this civil war up. So we'll see how it plays out here in the coming WiF portion of the turn. But for now, you can see we're going to apply the opposite of the treaty chart. And as far as U.S. entry goes, we're going to apply half the treaty chart. This is not going to be modified because Italy is neither communist nor democracy. So we'll just take half the treaty chart rounded up as far as the U.S. entry effect. So let me go ahead and pay for the Italian option. We will record all of the minor country and U.S. entry effects, and then we will hop over to the maps to see which minor country Italy is going to activate this turn. Well, the minor country effects were limited mostly to a few countries in Central and South America. Both Argentina and Chile and Mexico, for that matter, all gained -1 Italian influence, as did Ireland. However, over on the Iberian Peninsula, as you might expect, Spain was not terribly happy with the assistance to the rebels, and that dropped the Italian influence there currently to -4. But remember, that is with the current Spanish government, and they are actively supporting the forces trying to overthrow that government. So if they are successful and the influence markers do not change between now and a hypothetical nationalist victory in the Civil War, what will happen is all of these influence markers will flip and become the opposite. So Italy would pick up a +4 as opposed to the current -4 if Franco and his nationalists do gain power in Spain. Portugal, however, did pick up +2 here, which brings the Italians to a +4 influence, and that is the highest positive influence that the Italians have anywhere among any of the minor countries. So I think for that reason, we are going to go ahead and have the Italians activate the Portugal here. And you can see there are two Japanese -1 markers there. It should be, they just simply add together to be -2. So I'll go ahead and take care of that as we head over to the status display and see where Portugal, if Portugal moves here as a result of the Italian support of the nationalists. Over on the status display, you can see Portugal is located here, not terribly far from where Poland was. I think Poland was located here at the beginning of the political phase this term. And we have our control markers here in that were in Portugal. Now we've got a +4 for Italy. We've got a +1 for China. We'll go ahead and resolve that, as that is not going to be enough to move the marker. Neither is the +1 for Germany and the -1 to the United States. So with those resolved, we really come down to just a -2 Japan and a +4 Italy. Portugal does have an alliance with the Commonwealth, which, as we saw with Poland, that means that any attempt to move the Portuguese marker further from the Commonwealth is going to cost 1 extra. So it'll be 3 to move the marker into either of these two hexes. The Italians do have 4, which is going to be enough to pay that cost. So they will move Portugal. Here, and that expends their 4. Now, unfortunately, the Japanese were sitting with a -2, and that is going to be enough to move the marker basically right back where it was, because there is no extra cost moving Portugal this way, since it is moving closer to its ally, the Commonwealth. So unfortunately for the Italians, the nice little buildup of influence they had there was kind of thwarted by the negative influence the Japanese had, and Portugal stays right where they are. But that is going to wrap up the implementation of the Italian option. Now we just need to roll to see if they end the political phase before the Soviet Union can go. And since we have had one option selected previously, there's going to be a -1 to this roll. So a 1 or a 2 will be enough to end the turn before the Soviets can go. And look at that. We've got a 1 that's going to end the political phase prematurely. Stalin is not terribly happy with that. However, in compensation, he will get some bonus political points, bid points for next turn's political phase. Their political effectiveness is currently 4. So they'll get an extra 4 points to bid for position in the September-October turn. At least it's some sort of consolation, but I know Uncle Joe is really not happy right now with the Italians. So that is, like I said, going to wrap up the political phase. We now need to place the reinforcements. I'll roll for initiative and for weather, and I'll roll for initiative and weather, then we'll go ahead and take a look at the reinforcements that are coming on map this turn before jumping into the WiF portion of the turn. So back in a moment. And for the initiative roll, the Axis rolled, or the Fascists rolled a 9, the Democrats rolled a 7. Both of them are sitting in the -1 box of the initiative track. So that nets out to an 8 for the Fascists, a 6 for the Democrats, and the Communists rolled a 7. Now the Fascists are going to choose to go first. The Communists are going to choose to go after the Democrats. So it's going to be Fascists, Democrats, then Communist order of impulses this turn. The weather roll was a 7. However, we had a +2 for the last weather roll, which gives us a net 9 on the chart. That's going to be fine weather everywhere except North Monsoon, where it's going to be storm, and the impulse marker is going to move up 1 box on the impulse track. Now, looking at the reinforcements, we're looking at this wedge of the circle for the July-August turn. You can see the Chinese are going to be getting an army that was shattered last time, and here are the Republican reinforcements, which, as you can see, are fairly considerable. They're getting a good motorized corps. They're getting Azania, his headquarters back, and another infantry corps. So those 3 are going to be very welcome by the Republicans. The only question is, are they too late? The Japanese, as you can see here, they're getting Yamamoto headquarters. Speaking of headquarters, the Germans are going to be getting von Bock. The Germans are also going to be getting an armored corps, a panzer corps here. They have a Stuka and a pilot. So that's an excellent bomber. They're going to go ahead, and we know they're going to deploy that right onto the map. So we'll leave this here. We won't bother putting the pilot on the track because he's going to come off immediately. The Commonwealth, again, another tanker point and convoy point. Speaking of convoy points, the Japanese are going to add another one there. The Soviets are bringing Zhukov on, who's an excellent headquarters, as well as a cavalry corps. The Italians are going to get a pilot. I'm going to put that on the track for now. And then I do think they have a bomber / transport in the reserve pool they may pull out. The Commonwealth gets a transport. They also get a pilot. It's going to bump that up. That's going to bring them up to a total of 6 pilots now on the track. The French are going to add a pilot as well. That's going to give them 3 and a headquarters in the form of Georges. So, almost forgot the big ships here. The United States is adding the USS Tennessee. The Anson is going into the construction pool for the Commonwealth. The French add their first carrier, I think it's their first carrier, the Béarn. And the Japanese are going to get Shokaku. Now, the Japanese have plenty of pilots, and they have some carrier planes they're going to add. As a matter of fact, we'll just pull this one out. They'll go ahead and put that CVP onto Shokaku. That's going to lower their pilot reserves to 5. So there we go. We'll get these units right here, as you can see, out onto the map. Once they are set up, we'll be ready to jump right into the Fascist first impulse. We're going to start off this turn in Europe with the fascists. The Italians do have, they have no port attacks, there's no naval air missions, they do have naval movement. They are sailing a transport here into the Western Med. And then we're moving on to naval combat. There's no naval combat, no strategic bombardment. Ground strike missions. This is going to take us to Spain. So if we slide over here, the question the Nationalists have is, do they want to use this bomber here to potentially ground strike Valencia, Madrid, or any number of other Republican strongholds? You can see with the 3 reinforcements that the Republicans had, Madrid is fully stacked with 2 large land units, so they couldn't place another unit in Madrid, and they weren't able to reinforce adjacent to the city because of the zones of control. Likewise, in Malaga down here, they did place the infantry corps there in the city. And Azania was able to arrive in Valencia, and then the motorized corps was able to be placed adjacent to it. Now, the Nationalists, I think, are absolutely going to focus here on Madrid and try and wipe out the defenders there and seize the capital. That will put the Republicans in a bit of a bad way if the Nationalists can take Madrid this turn or next turn. They have quite a number of forces that are within reach of the capital to launch a decent attack on it. The +1 from a ground strike would help. Let me go ahead. I'm going to take a moment here and take a look at the Nationalists, see if they are going to need the 3 tactical factors here to add to any attack, or if not, if it won't be enough to increase them up another column, then they probably will go ahead and launch a ground strike there against Madrid. So back in a moment after a little bit of math. Well, after looking at what the Nationalists will be able to bring here against Madrid this turn, the 3 tack factors there are not going to be enough to push the attack up to another odds column. So they will go ahead and fly in a ground strike against the Hex. And this, of course, is going to go ahead and trigger the Spanish Republican fighters to come up and intercept them, which will in turn allow the Nationalist fighters to intercept the interceptors, and we will have yet another air battle. Now, this should look very familiar, as we've seen this encounter a couple of times previously in the Civil War here. We've got the Republican fighter stream here, the Nationalist fighter stream and bomber stream. So with just 3 airplanes involved, it's a very small battle. It is going to be a +1 for the Nationalists versus a -1 for the Republicans. The Republicans, being the non-phasing player, are going to roll first. They're on the -1 column. Let's see what they end up getting here. And it is an excellent roll for the Republicans. That is an 18. An 18 on the -1 is a DX, which is going to be defender destroys their own front fighter or front bomber. So this will be a choice for the Nationalists. Now the box is yellow, which indicates the pilot survives if shot down over friendly territory. Madrid is not friendly territory, so the pilot will be destroyed as well. So an excellent attack by the Republicans. The Nationalists are going to choose to lose their fighters here. So the fighters and the pilot are destroyed. However, fire is simultaneous here in each round of air combat, so they are going to get their +1 shot. And in order to get the job done here, they'd like to get a well, obviously they'd like to return the favor and destroy the Republican fighter, but an abort will work just as well. So let's see what they roll here, and they don't roll nearly as well. They roll a 9. A 9 on the +1 column is a no effect. So first round, first blood goes to the Republicans, and it puts the Nationalists in a bit of a quandary here. They can choose to abort the battle right now, and their bombers will not be subjected to any potential destruction, but they also won't be able to get the ground strike in. The Republicans, and as far as the odds, if you will, in the air battle. It's now going to be 3 attacking 2, so it's going to be flip-flop. The Republicans will be rolling on the +1 column, the Nationalists will be rolling on the -1, and I think that the Nationalists are going to press their luck. We're going to go ahead and not abort. The Republicans, of course, are not going to abort. So we move on to round 2 with the Republicans taking the first shot here. I think the Nationalists are hoping that they're going to roll something nice and average, which they don't roll as well as they did last time, but it's still not a bad roll, especially on the +1 column. This 14 is going to be a DA, Defender Aborts Front Fighter or Front Bomber. So the Republican Air Force has answered the call here by shooting down and killing the pilots of the fighters, as well as turning the bombers back. However, the bombers do get a shot off on the -1 column. If they roll well enough, they can inflict some damage here. Let's see what happens. And that's not going to be the case. They rolled a 12, which is attacker clears through anyone defending bombers. So with no Republican bombers to be cleared through, that is going to wrap up the air battle, and the tide has certainly turned in favor of the Republicans in the skies over Madrid. Now we will continue on with the rest of the turn. The aborted Nationalist bombers return to their bases here in Zaragoza. The Republican fighters, they have a range of 4, as you can see here, and rather than rebase there to Madrid and risk being overrun while face down and therefore destroyed, they decided to rebase because they can rebase up to their the full distance of their range. They've decided to rebase to the more secure location of Valencia. What that does mean, however, is that Madrid is now going to be devoid of any air cover should the siege here continue. But again, the Republicans just couldn't afford to risk the chance of losing the fighters here. There's going to be no rail movement. Now that brings us to land movement. The Nationalists get all of 3 land moves, so they're going to slide those 2 over for 1, 2, and they'll push this infantry up there for 3, and that's going to do, oh, I take that back. You know what? We're going to leave that one right there. So that's just going to be, we'll move the 2 infantry corps, leaving us a 3rd land move. As we move on to air transport, there's none of that. Debark units at sea. This is why we wanted to not move the artillery, because the Italians are making good on their promises. They're going to land the 10th Corps here at Cartagena with the final land move of the impulse. There are no invasions or paradrops. Land combat. Well, you can see there are 9 defensive factors in Madrid right now. These Nationalists can bring 7, 9, 6 is 15, 16. They can bring all of 21 right now to the attack. 21 to 9. That's only a 2 to 1. And if they wait another impulse, they'll be able to continue to bring in a few more units. They've got 3 units here that they would like to get involved in the attack, which will be able to shift the attack up another column and give them a better chance of success. So I think that's going to do it here in Spain and Europe, for that matter. As far as Germany goes, nothing really going on here other than you can see they put their new bombers here, as well as was it von Bock and the Panzer Corps all deployed here in Western Germany. So with that, we're going to move out to Asia and see what the Japanese decide to do. Over here in Asia, you can see we've got bad weather here in North Monsoon, which is the southern part of the front here. This is probably going to be a bit of a slow turn for the Japanese. Again, with the monsoon season hitting, there's only a 10% chance of there being fine weather in the North Monsoon zone. So the southern half of the Japanese front is going to be pretty much deadlocked because of the combination of terrain and weather, plus the lack any headquarters down here. That's what's been really holding them back. They have the port here that everybody is tracing to, but the supply lines are reduced by 1 hex in rain and storm. So they're basically limited to either being on the coast, like this hex here, or adjacent to the port, like the rest of the army. Now, they did just receive Yamamoto as a reinforcement here this turn. I would expect to see him show up in the south, although it is a bit of a waste given the fact that when he comes ashore, he's only got 3 movement, and the port here, being a headquarters, he's got to be able to land in the port. He's going to be turned upside down, face down, because of the mountainous terrain there and the cost. But we'll go ahead and bring the transports out here anyway, and you know what? Let's go ahead and we're going to pay the cost of a combined impulse in oil here, just because I think we've got some other things we may end up doing. But we've got the naval move. I think they get 2 naval moves, is that right? For the Japanese in a combined. Remember, they are at war with China, but because of the political option they played, it's a limited war, meaning they can only choose combined impulses for the first 2 years, and we're not quite there yet. And they do, in fact, get 2 naval moves. That would be considered 1. And we want to bring the combined out. Yeah, why not? If we paid for it, we might as well move it, because we're unlimited at this point, having paid the oil cost of the impulse type, which for the Japanese here as a combined in it's going to be combined. It's going to be 7/10 of an oil, which they do have to spare. So that's going to be the naval moves. There's no port attacks or naval air missions. There's no naval combat, no strategic bombardment, now ground strike missions. Again, the weakness that the Japanese have is their tactical air power. You can see they've got some bombers here. They're pretty good naval air. They've got a great range of 14, a 3 air-to-sea factors, but only a single tactical factor for land combat, and their land bombers aren't really much better than that. So no ground strikes there. Rail movement, I don't see any rail movement. We want to do land movement. Now, with the land movement, we are restricted to, I believe it's 3 for the Japanese. It is 3 in a combined. We will have to save 1 if we want to bring Yamamoto here ashore somewhere. What we're going to do is we're going to move this cavalry to 4, and that's going to give them control of Qingdao port there, which is important because now they'll be able to trace supply there for anybody down in here. And it also raises the question of, maybe do the Japanese want to land Yamamoto here at Qingdao during the debark step, rather than bringing him in at Fuchao down here in the south, where he's really not going to be doing any good this turn, I don't think. Since he'll be inverted, everybody's already going to be in supply here. They're not really going to be able to make any decent attacks. He might be of more use actually up here in the north. So we'll take a look at that. Land movement. Anybody else we want to move? I think we're all right for now. They are, believe it or not, getting a little thin on the ground. They've been able to expand their perimeter here to the point where there's not a lot of density anymore on the Japanese side, which the Chinese are more than happy to deal with. By the way, the Chinese did place their reinforcing army here to beef up the central portion of their line, knowing that there's probably not going to be much activity going on down here this turn. It buys them another turn to get some troops, hopefully next turn with the reinforcements to start bolstering the south here before the weather gets good, right as the weather tends to shut down in the north. So you get this rhythm in WiF because of the way the weather works in Asia, where in the summertime, the northern part of the sector, the northern sector of the front tends to be where most of the action is happening, and then as the bad weather closes in the winter months, the weather clears up down here in the south, and you see the Japanese offensives sort of switch to the southern portion. We're looking at air transport. We certainly don't have any of that, so we are going to go with land debark, and we will bring Yamamoto ashore. We'll bring him into Qingdao, actually, because from here he may be able to help with some attacks, and then we can always pull him out next turn when the weather starts to get better, or the turn after that, pull him out by sea and land him in the south here in time for any big push with the good weather there. Land combat, I don't see any land combat that the Japanese really want to do in this impulse. It's going to take them probably another impulse to get set up. They do have a couple of attacks they want to make. Again, they need to keep the pressure up on the Chinese, because the last thing the Japanese can afford is for the Chinese to be able to rebuild their ground strength and make that defensive line that much harder to punch through. So unfortunately for the Japanese, I think that's going to do it. A rather uneventful turn. They did get another headquarters into China here, and aside from that, we have no reorganization. I think that means we are going to move on to the Democrats, and as far as the Democrats go, we'll just keep it here in Asia, because this is going to be really quick for the Chinese. They really don't have anything they want to do. The Japanese haven't really changed the situation appreciably as of yet. The Chinese are reasonably satisfied with their position that they're in now. So the Chinese can be considered to have completed their first impulse. Now we have to go back to Europe to see if the European Democrats are going to be doing anything. Well, the focus for the Democrats in Europe is of course Spain right now. The Commonwealth doesn't really have much going on. They did establish a convoy pipeline through the North Sea and Baltic Sea to Poland to start bringing in the two resources that they signed the agreement for earlier this turn in the political phase. Other than that, they don't have much in the way of forces or a need, although they would like to start maybe reinforcing the Mediterranean here. They're going to need to get some additional troops on map in order to do that. You can see they do have HMS Eagle sitting here in Plymouth, awaiting the deployment of a carrier plane. They have a couple of carrier planes in reserve right now that they would like to put onto Eagle. The problem is they're too big for Eagle's current size. Eagle has an air capacity of 1. The units, there are a couple of Gladiator units that they're looking to get onto some of these older, smaller carriers. They're currently sized 2, and they won't drop to size 1 until 1940, but we are in July, August right now, so another 3 turns and they will be able to fit on Eagle. So Eagle is just going to kind of mark time there in Plymouth and before receiving those planes, and then Eagle will probably head back out to the Pacific to rejoin the forces there in Singapore. France did receive Georges, which now gives them all 3 headquarters on map, and they may do a little rearranging. It really depends on what activities they have left over from what the Republicans do. The Democrats are going to prioritize Republican moves over French moves right now because, again, France is at peace, and it's a little more critical that the Republicans are able to do as much as they can. However, looking at the Republican situation, it's really not that good. They're kind of going into a siege mentality right now. You can see they've got a pretty strong grouping of forces, relatively speaking, in the Valencia area. They've got a fairly strong garrison here in Madrid, but it is isolated, and a slightly less stronger garrison here in Malaga, but the mountainous terrain is going to help, and of course there are practically no nationalist units in the vicinity there. The problem is the Republicans are in a reasonably okay position defensively, but they're really not necessarily in a good position to start launching some attacks, which is unfortunately what they really need to do to try to break up the nationalist forces here and perhaps save Madrid. But I think what they are going to kind of be forced to do, from at least from here on out, is maybe sort of move into a defensive mindset and look for opportunities to counterattack only after the nationalist forces have hopefully bloodied themselves in an attempt to take either Madrid or try and claw their way into Valencia here. So the Republicans really don't see a lot of opportunities for improving their current position. So they are, I think, content to kind of stand pat, which will allow the French to go ahead and use those land moves. And I think they get 3 land moves. So we're going to slide Bredelat up. We're going to bring Biot here, and then we'll pull back Georges here. Put this artillery back. That'll be our 3 land moves there, and that's also going to wrap up the Democrats' first impulse, bringing us up to the communists, and we'll see what the communists have up their sleeves. The Soviet Union, they get 5 land moves in a combined impulse. They also get 1 rail move, and they've got no port attacks, naval or air activities. That brings us right up to the rail movement, and they are going to rail this cavalry corps down here, and then on to the land movement. They will go 1, 2, 3, and bring those units there. That's 2 of their land moves. For the rest of their land moves, we're going to head out to Asia. Remember that in the combined Days of Decision World in Flames games, that the Chinese communists are controlled by the communists, by the USSR, and their activity limits fall under the communists rather than under China Democrats. So they've got Mao here in the front line. They'd really prefer to pull him back out of the front line, and then they're going to move the Lan Chao militia into the mountains, which will invert them because of the movement point cost, but that's going to consume another 2 land moves, leaving the Soviets with just 1 more land move, and that's going to take place a little bit further to the northeast. Up here you can see they placed Zhukov here and the cavalry corps both in Khabarovsk. And what do we do? Let's bring the cavalry corps down. I think Forest on the Pacific is 3, so they don't have quite enough to get into the hex here. But that'll be the 5 land moves for the Soviets. They've got no air transport, debark, invasions, paradrops, land combat, air rebases. No air rebases or reorganization. So that's going to wrap up the communist first impulse. That brings it back around to the fascist second impulse. We'll have to roll weather first, and then we'll probably just go ahead and keep it here in Asia, since we are looking at China, and do the Japanese second impulse. Well, the Japanese almost regretted sending Yamamoto to the north. If you recall, I said that there was a 10% chance of fine weather occurring in North Monsoon this turn, and the weather roll was a 2, so just missed it. The weather did improve from storm in North Monsoon to rain in North Monsoon. That was the only change, and the impulse markers moving up just 1 box on the track now after each impulse. This should be, considering it's July, August, kind of the height of summer, this should be a long turn, but since we're still in a what would be called a limited war here in China, and the only other shooting conflict going on right now is in Spain, it's probably going to be a long turn with a lot of impulses where not a lot is happening because of the combined action type restrictions on everybody in Spain as well as the Japanese here in Asia. However, that doesn't mean nothing is going to happen. And as far as the Japanese go, they have no naval or air activity. There's no rail movement either, which brings them to land movement. They get 3 land moves. We're going to bring Yamamoto down here as well as the cavalry. And let's see, do we have anything else? I think let's see, let's bring this guy here. There's our 3 land moves. No air transport, no debark, no invasions or paradrops. That brings us to land combat. And I think we are going to go ahead and attack Shanghai here, being defended by the warlord forces. We're going to attack from the 2 hexes here, one on either side. We've got the Imperial Guard Marines with the Tokyo Militia for a total of 12 attacking from the south, and then from the north here we've got 17, but they are attacking across a river. I don't know if you can see that there. It's going to halve that to 8.5. 8.5 plus 12 is 20.5. That's going to round to 21. 21 to 4 gives us a 5 to 1, and the Chinese are going to go ahead and choose the assault table again to try to slow down the attacking Japanese. So the question for the Japanese is, do they want to have Yamamoto provide any offensive HQ support? That would give them a +1. So we'd be looking at a 5 to 1 +1 versus just a straight up 5 to 1. The +1 would eliminate the possibility of the Japanese losing 2 units. They roll a 1 right now. That's exactly what will happen. They are guaranteed to take the hex no matter what with the single defender there. The flip side of that is Yamamoto is going to be turned face down at the end of the combat and not be of much use from here on out. And I think that the Japanese would like to, they see some opportunities for more than just this one attack down here. So I think they're going to hold off and not have Yamamoto provide any offensive HQ support, in the hopes that they roll well enough to keep him face up along with the rest of the attackers. So with that, I think we can go right to the die roll here. We're looking at a 5 to 1 straight up on the assault table. And for the Japanese, like I said, they will take the city. It's not a question of that. They need a 5 or better to retain at least half of their units face up, and they need a 3 or better to avoid any losses. Here we go. Well, they got a 5, which is going to be a cross result and then 2S. So the Chinese are going to suffer 2 losses. The rest are going to be shattered, and since they have a lone defender, he will be destroyed. And the Japanese will take Shanghai. And then half of the attackers will remain face up. Now we have 5 attackers, so it looks like a couple of them are going to be turned face down. We'll just have to figure out which ones we'd like those to be. I think we will move Yamamoto into Shanghai, and I think we'll leave everybody else where they are. We'll turn the cavalry face down, and we'll turn the Marines here face down. And that was a reasonably successful, I think, attack, considering how the Japanese have rolled in many of their earlier attacks. I think it's a very successful. It was a bloodless attack, and they managed to keep 3 of their units face up. So there's still some possibility for some additional Japanese activity this turn. And that is going to, well, let's see, what do we have? You know, Japanese may look at reorganizing these guys here in the coast. So they're going to have to wait till next impulse to do that, however. So that is going to wrap up the second Japanese impulse. Now we'll head back to Europe and see what the Nationalists are doing. Back in Europe with the Fascists, and we're going to start out in Spain with Franco's Nationalists. We have no naval activities, there's no strategic bombardment, ground strike missions, nor any rail movement. So that brings us right up to the land movement step. And they get 3 land moves. They're going to use all 3 of them to improve their chances here in a potential attack on Madrid. This is now the focus of the nationalist war effort is to seize Madrid. If they can do that, that should give them a sizable edge in the war. But first, they've got to take Madrid, and it's not going to be easy. That's going to do it for our land movement. We have no air transport, no debark, no invasions or paradrops, so we're up to the land combat step. And we still have 9 defense strength here in Madrid, but now with the latest additions, the attackers are going to be able to bring 4, 7, 9, 20, 30 attacking factors. So we've got 30 to 9, which is a 3 to 1, an improvement over what they could have brought last impulse. We could also add Franco have him add some offensive HQ support, which would give us a +1. So we're looking at a 3 to 1 +1. And the question, just like last impulse, is if I wait one more impulse, can I improve the odds of the attack yet again? And in order to do that, we're going to have to add at least 6 attacking factors. And looking around, I don't see that happening, at least not without severely compromising the nationalist position elsewhere. So this is probably as good as it gets. And honestly, a 3 to 1 is for the Spanish Civil War. That's about the best you can expect in certainly in circumstances that we're looking at right now. So I think we will go ahead and make the attack, and we will use Franco's offensive HQ support, so we'll turn him face down. Now, looking at the table, the Republicans are going to take the assault table, of course, and try and make this as bloody as they can for the Republicans. 3 to 1 +1. If the Nationalists roll a 6 on the die, so raw 6 or better, they will end up taking Madrid. They'll need to roll at least a 3 to kill something of the defenders, kill one of the defenders. Now, that, though, really isn't going to do them much good, because even though they would be killing one of the defenders, everybody's going to be face down. They'll be done for the turn, and that means that at the beginning of September, October, the incoming Republican reinforcements, they can easily pop 1 or more units into Madrid to replace whatever is killed. So this really is an all or nothing attack for the Nationalists. Let's see what happens here. This is potentially the biggest attack yet in the war. If Franco can take Madrid, that should give him an almost insurmountable edge in the war here. But at first, he needs to roll 6 or better, and we get an 8. We can see there he goes. Get an 8 +1. It's going to be a 9, net 9. That's actually quite good. It's a cross /2S, so no losses for the Nationalists. And not only did they suffer no losses, but half of the attackers will remain face up. Meanwhile, the defending Republicans are going to take 2 losses with the rest of the defenders shattered. Now, there are only 2 units here, so both the infantry and the militia corps are going to be destroyed and go into the force pool. Now, the Nationalists will triumphantly enter Madrid. We'll have to figure out which ones. I think we'll have these 2 enter here. They will take Madrid. The artillery will enter as well. But now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There were 8 attacking units, half of which will stay face up. So 4 of them remain face up. We'll have the 3 units there, and I guess we'll have the motorized corps there also remain face up. So not only do the Nationalists manage to take the capital, that is going to really kind of set back the Republicans now, because they only hold Valencia here and Malaga here. Once those 2 cities fall, those will be the last of the victory locations required to bring an end to the war. So a big step forward there for the Nationalists. Not only do they take the city, but they've got a decent chunk of the attackers are still face up and able to continue to press the Republicans this turn before they can get any more reinforcements on the board. So a very good turn in Spain for the fascists. And as we look over the rest of Europe, the Italians are really kind of standing pat. There's not much for them to do. The Germans, with their combined, they continue to bring over some units, and you can see there's a buildup of German ground and air units here along the western border here, particularly of the Netherlands and Belgium. So Germany may be planning something in the near future. We shall see, but that is going to wrap up the fascist second impulse. Now we kick it back over to the Democrats. We're going to stay in Europe for the start of the Democrats' second impulse. But before we get to that, I did just want to mention that Germany did spend the 7/10 oil to pay the full oil cost for her combined impulse, last impulse. She's getting to the point now where she has a number of oil-dependent units on map that she's needing to move about. So while I didn't mention it then, I did want to just go ahead and mention it now, in case anybody was wondering. She's got fairly ample fuel reserve, so it's oil reserve, so it's not a major impact yet. Now, with that out of the way, let's get on with the Democrats. We'll start in Spain as usual, and the question for the Republicans now is, well, what now? Having just lost Madrid, they're really in a bad way. They're kind of holed up in two separate enclaves here, one in the south in Malaga and another one here based in the east around Valencia. They've lost 3 build points with the fall of Madrid, which is only leaving them with the 2 they'll get for Valencia and Malaga, which is not very much. So they're looking at potentially losing an attritional conflict from here on out, unless they get some help from the Democrats or perhaps even the Communists. And I say perhaps the Communists when actually the Communists are indeed the only ones that have given them any sort of help so far in the Civil War. So the Republicans are in fact outnumbered. If they go strictly into a passive defense, it's probably just a matter of time before they succumb to the Nationalists, but their opportunities for taking the initiative and striking out are pretty limited right now. The Italian troops that just landed here at Cartagena are a bit exposed. In fact, if the Republicans use their units in these 2 hexes to attack them, they could get a nice 4-to-1 attack on the Italians, but again, that attack is not without risks. A 2 result would see the Republicans lose 2 units, which at this point would be an utter disaster for them. And really, that's kind of the best case attack they've got. Even doing so, they would basically need to give up this hex, which is a second hex adjacent to Valencia, which again, losing Valencia would be just as bad as losing those 2 units in the attack. So I'm not seeing a lot of opportunities here for any kind of offensive activity on the part of the Republicans. I think they may be at the point here where they're just trying to delay the inevitable for as long as possible, which would ultimately help or hurt the fascists, because the longer this war goes on, the less likely the winner of the war is to actively join either one side or the other in any larger conflict. So without outside help, I think the Republicans are doomed, but it's still going to take a while. They do have the advantage of some excellent terrain here. They're basically all in mountain hexes here, and if they maybe get some outside help, if the Nationalists get unlucky in some of their attacks, none of which are going to be easy, then there may be an opportunity down the road to flip the script here and turn the tables on the Nationalists. But I don't see it at this point, and I think doing really anything with the Republicans right now is simply going to make the Nationalist job of finishing them off that much easier. So I think the Republicans are going to stand pat, if you will. Now, moving up to France and the Commonwealth, obviously they're a little concerned at the German activity here in the West, but there's not really a lot or anything they can do about it. The French are pretty satisfied with their troop deployment right now, and until they can get more units on the ground, maybe in the air, there's not a lot they can do as far as taking the initiative against Germany. They just have to be as ready as they can be in case the Germans decide to start hostilities. And they're pretty satisfied that they are. The Commonwealth is even, I don't want to say less prepared, but their ground forces are even more minimal. They have a motorized infantry corps and a motorized artillery unit out here in the west, ready to board a couple of transports for immediate deployment overseas in the event of something happening. And then they've got Lord Gord sitting here in London. But that's pretty much the extent of the Commonwealth ground forces in Europe. They have a division sitting in Gibraltar, and that's literally it. So they really don't have much they can do right now. So again, they are content to kind of leave things as they are, which means we're going to head out to Asia, and we're going to see how the Chinese react to the fall of Shanghai. Out here in Asia, again, there's not much to see as far as the Democrats are concerned. The Chinese have been preparing for the loss of Shanghai. They've been pulling troops back, trying to form a line here, which they've managed to do. The only question really for the Chinese right now is, do they want to try and hold on to Nanking here, or do they want to try and withdraw the 2 garrison units there? Certainly they're a bit exposed out here, but they do have a river line on the 2 northern hex sides here, which will help with the defense. It's also a city, and when it comes to U.S. entry, every city that the Japanese have to take is potentially going to accelerate U.S. entry, which is a good thing for the Democrats. I think the Chinese are content to leave these units here. One factor to take into consideration is if they do move, even if it's into a clear hex like Wuhan here, because they only have 1 movement factor, they're going to be turned face down, and that's going to potentially give the Japanese a +1 if they were to attack that hex this turn. So I think the Chinese are content to stick with their strategy of making the Chinese attack every single hex, or at least as many hexes as possible, for them to advance through China and really try to maintain this main line of defense here. So the Chinese are again content to sort of sit pat where they are now until the situation changes, for hopefully for the better, but potentially for the worse. They really won't have much to do. So I think that's going to wrap it up for a very uneventful Democrat impulse. And honestly, I think most of the remaining Democrat impulses are going to be very similar, unless, of course, something drastic changes in the board states. So with that, let's move on to the communist second impulse and see what's going on there. Well, you may be wondering why we are looking at the political initiative track. That's because I wanted to remind you of the political initiative here. You can see the Soviet Union here is in the 3rd position. Japan is down here in the 6th position. And that is very important for what is about to happen. Namely, this, Russian option number 9, Nomonhan incident. Now you can see there's a prerequisite that the Russian initiative position is less than the Japanese, which is what we just observed there on the track. This was the option that Russia was trying to play during the political phase, but the political phase ended prior to the Soviets being able to play this. And as you can see here under the effects, may be played reactionary. And what that means is it may be played, any option that is that says it can be played reactionary, means that it may be played during the World in Flames portion of the turn during the declaration of war step. And in the Soviets, or the Communist Second Impulse of July-August here, the Soviets are going to basically initiate a border war with the Japanese. They have been building up forces in the Soviet Far East over the last several turns. The Japanese have seemed to just happy to ignore them, or maybe didn't notice. But essentially, what this is going to do, first of all, it's going to add the Siberian infantry to your force pool. The Soviets have, I think, 3 or 4 Siberian infantry units that are very good units as far as Soviet infantry goes. And now we will be able to add those to the force pool and build them in subsequent turns. But we also initiate a border war with Japan. Now, there are no reserve units, so the Soviets are not going to be able to call out their reserves at all. The Japanese already have their reserves on map due to the war with China they're involved in, so that's not going to be affected. Combined actions only, so both sides limited to combined actions. Again, that's not going to change much for the Japanese since they've been limited to combined actions in China. There's no political effectiveness or PML effects, production multiple level effects. There's no strategic bombing allowed, there's no naval combats, no port strikes, and the war automatically lapses after 1 turn, but there's no neutrality pact that's put in place. So this is essentially a 1-turn little border skirmish. For the Soviets, what they get out of it is, again, the biggest thing is they get to throw those good Siberian infantry units into their force pool for future builds. They can also maybe mess with the Japanese a little bit if they were to occupy Japanese-controlled resources or factories in Manchuria. That's going to disrupt Japanese production, at least for this turn. They'll revert to Japanese control when the war lapses. Everything will go back to the borders that exist now. So this is primarily just a little way to kind of be annoying to the Japanese and then also get those good troops into the force pool. What will happen is the cost you can see here is 3 money, and then we've got some minor political effects that are involved, as well as U.S. entry effects. That'll all be taken care of in the next political phase, which will occur at the start of the September-October turn. And now the Russians will have to select option 9 in that political phase before they're allowed to select anything else. So with that out of the way, let's head over to Asia and let's see what this border skirmish ends up looking like. As you can see, this is the bulk. Actually, I think this is pretty much everything that the Soviets have in the Far East and in Asia here. Considerably more than the Japanese garrison in Manchuria and even Korea. There's no naval combat, so we're not going to worry about sorting the subs or anything there. I will start off by saying that the Soviets are, in fact, paying the oil cost to fuel this combined impulse, and right now that's 6/10 of an oil point. They have more than enough sitting in their storage silos in Siberia, so they've paid their 6/10. We don't have any naval activity. There's no strategic bombardment allowed under the option, and there's no aircraft out here, as you can see, so really no air activity either. Rail movement, the Soviets do have some troops in Europe that potentially would be nice to have here in Asia, but they're going to be turned face down if they rail over, and since it's literally a 1-turn war, there's no point in railing anybody in because they won't be able to do anything. Which brings us right to our land movement, and the Soviets get 5 land moves in a combined impulse. Now, I'd like to do something with the 2 armies we have out here, but unfortunately they are technically out of supply here from Chita out here. So as long as if they move, they're going to be inverted. That would be kind of bad if the Japanese were somehow able to get some troops in position to attack them. So we may just be content to leave these guys here for now. But further east, we've got a number of units that are in supply, and we'll start off by getting the Mech Corps into the mountains there. We'll bring both of the infantry here into the forest. That's 1, 2, 3. Zhukov will move into the mountains for 4, and And we'll bring the cavalry down here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the 5 land moves. We've got no air transport, no debark, no invasions or paradrops, and as of yet, no land combat. Air rebases, again, we could maybe think about flying some guys in from Europe, but it'll probably take them too long to get here, and I don't know that there's much they would be able to do. The Soviets don't really have much Air Force actually on map as is. And again, this is primarily just a one turn. Let's see if we can screw with the Japs a little bit and maybe get our good infantry into the force pool. So, if we're lucky, maybe we can kill these guys here in Harbin, maybe take a resource or two out there. That's going to do it, though, for the communist second impulse, which means we're going to go back to the fascists, but we're going to have to roll weather first. The weather roll was a 3, which means the weather is going to be fair everywhere or fine everywhere, except for the North Monsoon Zone where it's rain. So that's the same weather as we had last set of impulses. For the Japanese, the Nomonhan incident is a bit of an unpleasant surprise, but having looked things over, they are probably going to just ignore it. They'll take their lumps, whatever the Soviets managed to do this turn, they managed to do, but don't know if they're going to necessarily weaken their position in China, knowing that at the end of this turn, the war will lapse and things will go back to the status quo ante. So, with that in mind, looking at the sequence of play, we do have some naval movement. We are going to sortie this transport out here into the China Sea. I think that's going to be all we're going to do. There's no naval combat, no strategic bombardment or ground strike missions, rail movement. Now, here's the one possible thing the Chinese might opt to do. They could rail some reinforcements into Manchuria here, but it's going to be maybe another impulse or two before the Soviets can really get rolling. Let's see. I think you know what, maybe on second thought, maybe they will go ahead and rail that unit there. That'll at least force the Soviets to fight for Mukden and the factories there if they get that far. Land movement, again, we're looking at our standard 3 land moves per impulse, and we are going to advance into Hangzhou. That's 1, 2, and do we have a third one somewhere? I think that may be it. I think we may be content with that for now. All right, so there's the land movement. No air transport, no debark, invasions, paradrops, no land combat. Although, what do we have here? We've got 5 defense strength. We've got now 12, and 8 is 20. We've got 8 and 8, 16 north of the river. That's half. So that's 28 to 5. That's a 5-1 on the assault. That's a pretty decent chance of taking the city, particularly if Yamamoto adds his offensive HQ support. Do we want to do that, though? Although, say a 5-1, that's going to be +1, so we've got a militia unit in place to take the loss. You know what? Let's go for it. The Japanese are, in fact, going to be making an attack here. They're going to follow up the occupation of Shanghai with an attack here on Nanking from these 4 hexes. It's 28 to 5. As I said, that's 5-1. Yamamoto will provide offensive HQ support. Now, he's a 4. If Chang provides defensive HQ support, that would reduce it to 3. Divided by 4, still 0.75, which rounds up to 1. So Chang will have no impact on the battle if he provides defensive HQ support. So for that reason, Chang is not going to do so. That'll keep him face up. But it does mean that the Japanese now have improved their attack to a 5-to-1 +1, and the Chinese will go ahead and I think they will choose the assault table again to try to make this as bloody as possible and keep those Japanese units turned face down. It's worked fairly well for them so far, so let's see what the roll looks like. 5-to-1 +1, 10. Wow, okay, that wouldn't have mattered which table they were on. That's an asterisk 2S, so that is by far the best attack we have seen the Japanese make, I believe, this game. So no losses to the Japanese. Everyone remains face up except for Yamamoto, of course, because of the offensive HQ support, which turns out to be unnecessary. So at least the Chinese can console themselves with the fact that they forced Yamamoto to go face down. The 2 units will be destroyed. There's nobody remaining to be shattered. And now the Japanese will occupy the city there, but that is another city that could potentially have an impact on U.S. entry. So I don't think either side was necessarily anticipating that successful of an attack, but for the Japanese, they consider it long overdue. Lastly, we're moving on to air rebases. I don't think the Japanese have anything they want to rebase. Reorganization. We are going to use the transports here at sea to reorganize the Marines on the coast here. And that is going to wrap up the fascist third impulse in Asia. So now we will jump back over to Europe and Spain and see how Franco decides to exploit his success at Madrid. This is going to be a quick impulse for Franco. Again, there's no naval or air activity to do, and we're basically just jumping right into the land movement. They are restricted to just 3 land moves, though. And the first of those, we're going to bring the Sevilla militia up 1-2 here to reinforce the vulnerable Italians here at Cartagena. And then we're going to have the artillery and the 6-3 infantry corps move down here from Madrid to help fill in the encirclement here of the Eastern Republican forces. Still too weak to really attack anywhere. The Republicans in the mountain hex here have a defense of 7, which is 14 with the terrain modifier, and we've got 7 and 8 is 15, so we barely have a 1-to-1 on the hex here right now, and we've got some time, I think, maybe to improve those odds. We certainly don't want to throw away the advantage we've gained with the successful attack in Madrid with a rash attack too soon here on the remaining Republicans. We've got another good unit there that we can bring down into the fight as well. So it's probably going to take at least a few more impulses, and it may even be next turn before the Nationalists are really in a position to make the attack that they want to make. So that's going to do it for Spain. As far as Germany goes, not much happening up there. They've already got, I think, most of what they want or need in position here in the west. They've got a very light screen of units here in the east watching the border with Poland, but other than that, Germany has, I think, probably done everything she needs to do this turn, so she should be fairly quiet from there on out. And again, the Italians, until they get some more troops or until something major in the board state changes, the Italians are probably just content to sit and spectate. So that's going to wrap up the fascist third impulse. Now we're moving on to the Democrats' third impulse. Looking at the situation in China, the Chinese obviously would have liked Nanking to hold out longer than it did, but with the fall of Nanking, which they had anticipated would happen at some point, they've got their line established. There's really not a lot they can do as far as shifting units around. I think maybe let's take this Kunming warlord and maybe move him into the mountains here southeast of the city up on the border with Vietnam. Other than that, they've got a 4-strength unit here that they maybe could slide into Chang's hex, but I don't think so. The Japanese are pretty much this is probably the most threatened hex right here with these 3 Japanese units potentially attacking it. The odds would be what? That would be 6 to 12, 24. They could get a 4-to-1 there. 4-to-1 again, not a great odds column, especially on the assault table, but they could take that on anything but a 1. But again, Chang might be able to contribute some defensive HQ support. Otherwise, you know what? Looking that over, maybe we do want to bring militia down here. Now this is moving into the North Monsoon zone, so it doubles the movement point cost, which is why they're going to be inverted, but they should be able to hold on. Then we're going to take the Chungking militia and move them up here. Now inverting them is less than ideal because that does give a +1 to any attackers, but that 4 now becomes an 8, and with that 24 attack to 8 instead of 6, it's 3-to-1, but it is a +1. That does make some bit of difference. And now really don't want to risk Wuhan by moving Chang in here, which would make this mountain hex pretty much impregnable for the balance of the turn, but it would reduce the defense here. The Japanese could, it's protected by a river line on this hex side and this hex side. That's 8, 13 to 4. See, that's like a 3-to-1, and that's before they maybe shift some troops up. So I think we're going to run the risk with the militia unit here in the mountains. If the Japanese decide to make that 3-to-1 attack, 3-to-1 +1, then we may just have to deal with it and see what happens if they manage to be successful. But I think that's going to do it for the Chinese. And, you know, actually, this is the first impulse that the turn could conceivably end. Now, it's a 0, which means it won't end unless the Democrats pass. Now, if all of the major powers pass, we get a -2 to the die roll, so it would end on a 1 or a 2. If all of the powers pass except for 1, it's a -1. And as we talked about last impulse with the Democrats, they really don't have anything to do in Europe, and I think they would rather see the turn end sooner than later. So I think we are just going to go ahead and pass with the European Democrats, which means we're looking at a -1. We'll do the end of turn roll here real quick. So not a real great chance, but it's better than nothing. We'll see what happens. Almost. That is a 3, which means the turn continues, which makes the communists quite happy because now we will move on to their 3rd impulse and we'll see how far into Manchuria they can get. Well, the situation here is very similar to last impulse. The Soviets will just continue to press forward with their 5 land moves. They are going to have the 2 armies here move up adjacent to Harbin. Zhukov is going to follow, I think, here. And then we'll have the mechanized corps move into the mountains down there. What are we looking at for? That's 1, 2, 3, 4 up, and 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll have the cavalry move here for 5. And let's see, we've got 7. 13 to 3 is a 4-to-1. But again, we come back to that kind of that WiF truism. You always want to ask yourself, if I wait one more impulse, can I make a better attack? And in this case, obviously, next impulse, Zhukov will be able to move up with his aid. We'll be able to bring 3 more with the cavalry. That's 11. We're almost doubling the attack factors we can bring if we wait 1 more impulse. So that 4 to 1 becomes maybe like a 7 to 1, which would be much more palatable for the Soviets. So I don't think we're going to do any attacks this impulse. We know that the turn is not going to end on this impulse. It'll go over to the fascists, where they certainly, I don't think, want the turn to end quite yet, and it won't unless the fascists, at least some of the fascists, pass, which means they'll go to the Democrats. They're likely to pass. If the communists can get past a potential Democrat pass, then they'll get back, they'll have that 4th impulse or 5th impulse they're looking for, and then be able to make a big attack there on Harbin. So that's going to wrap it up for this set of impulses. We'll go back, we'll roll the weather, and we will jump right into the next fascist impulse. The weather roll was a 10, which is not as bad as it sounds. It's going to remain fine everywhere except North Monsoon, where the rain has intensified to storm. But other than that, everything is the same as the last couple of impulses. The impulse marker still only is going to advance 1 box after each impulse. There is, however, a +1 to the next impulse's weather roll. So if we get a few 10s in a row, then it's going to start to impact, I think, operations in certain theaters. But that's not the case in this impulse with the Japanese. The rain pretty much shuts down this North Monsoon area. Of course, storm is definitely going to do that. But the one key point of the line they're looking at is the inverted militia unit here. As we talked about a little bit ago, they could bring 24 to 4 doubled to 8. It's 3 to 1 plus 1. The only problem is looking at that column on the assault table. If the Japanese roll a 1 or a 2, the only thing they're going to do is kill one of their guys and invert everybody else. If they roll a 3, they're going to lose 2, and yes, they would kill the militia and take the hex, but that's an expensive price to pay, I think, at this point. They've been fairly fortunate earlier this turn with their 2 previous attacks. I don't know if they necessarily want to push their luck. Of course, the question is, can we bring more firepower to bear and turn it into a 4 to 1 plus 1? And I don't see that happening. They're limited. Anybody who moves into this hex is going to be inverted and unable to attack. So they're kind of restricted to just reinforcing these 2 hexes. And they've got 8 points here they could slide down, but then they're going to have to do something with the guy that's already there. It's just not going to work out, I think, to be able to get to 4 to 1 this turn. Now, the other option is maybe going after Chang here. He's got a defensive 5, but again, he's got this river line here. We've got 8 there. We know we've got 8. We could bring another 6. That'd be 14, and 8, 22 halved is 11. It's only going to be a 2 to 1 versus Chang. So again, that's even worse odds than going after the guys in the mountains here. I think the Japanese are going to be content to hold off on any attacks this impulse. They are going to, however, slide. Well, yeah, why not? They're gonna bring that garrison unit up into Mukden here, just in case the Soviets get enough impulses to take out Harbin and then maybe come driving down this way. Hopefully that won't be the case. If necessary, they, as a matter of fact, before we do that, technically the rail movement is prior to that. You know what? Maybe instead of moving him, we'll just rail the militia unit up there. That'll increase the defense to 7, which hopefully will be sufficient to hold off any Soviet attack. And then as far as land movement goes, I don't see anything there. We do actually, got way ahead of myself here, we do have a naval move. We are going to bring the an amphib unit out of Osaka here, and they're going to pick up the Imperial Guard Marines that are on the coast there. So we should have done that during our naval movement. Then we've got our rail movement we've done. Land movement, I don't think we have anything we're going to do. Debark land units at sea. I don't think so. I think we're content with that. There's no reorganization. That's going to do it for the Japanese. As you can see, as the turn is progressing, they've kind of spent their energy, and things are starting to slow down here for them in the east, which the Chinese are plenty happy with. The Soviets, on the other hand, a little further north, are just getting rolling, and they're hoping to get several more impulses to wreak some havoc in Manchuria. With that, we're going to go back to the European fascists. And again, the only European fascists we need to worry about that's going to be doing anything really to look at are the nationalists in Spain. Here in Spain, again, the only thing the nationalists are doing is basically shifting their troops to now sort of encircle the large Republican pocket here around Valencia. And they've got 3 moves with which they can do that. I think they're going to shift this guy here. 1, 2, 3, yeah. Throw him there, and I don't even think they're going to do anything with that 3rd move, although I suppose they could. Let's go ahead and I'll bring that unit down. So there's their 3 land moves. Again, no combat, although now we do have 10, 12, 14, 24. We do have 24. 24 to, again, 7 doubled to 14. That's still, well, that's going to be a 3-2. It's better than a 1-1, but not by much. 3-2, unless they have some positive die roll modifiers, which they won't. It's just definitely not worth the attack at a 3-2. And again, they've got a number of units, including Franco himself, that are face down up here. As they continue to, if they wait till next turn, they can get them into position and make it a much more, or at least a slightly more profitable attack at that point. And again, the nationalists now that the production differential is so lopsided and the Republicans are so limited in what they can replace, the nationalists, I think, would be happy to go ahead and get into an attritional exchange, even losing 1 for 1, because the nationalists will easily be able to replace whatever they may lose, whereas the Republicans, aside from some divisions or garrison units, are going to be hard pressed without outside help. So that wraps up the fascist impulse. The turn can only end on a 0, which means we are going to go to the Democrats' turn. Now, the Democrats, the Chinese, since Japanese didn't actually do really anything to change the Chinese position, they're content to pass, as well as the European Democrats who passed last turn. So if all the Democrats pass, the end of turn die roll is normally a 1, but we're going to subtract 2 from that roll because everybody on the in the faction has passed, which means a 3 or less will bring the turn to an end and will make the communists less than pleased. It is a 7. I think there's 7. So the turn will continue. Stalin is very much relieved as he can continue to press forward in Manchuria, and that is exactly where we're going to be heading right now. Here we are back in the Far East and the Soviet impulse. Again, no naval or air activity. We've got no rail movement, so we'll get right into the land movement, of which they have 5 land moves. They'll bring the cavalry here. That's going to be 1. And I think they will slide that army over there for 2. They'll bring Zhukov down for 3. And they'll bring the Cav division into the mountains for 4. Let's see, anything else? I think these guys in Vladivostok are just going to stay there because they lack the movement to get anywhere. These guys are still out of supply. Now, if Zhukov can get to here, they'll be able to move as long as they stay within 2 hexes of them. So I think that's going to do it for Soviet movement. Again, no debark invasions or paradrops, so land combat. Now what do we have here in Harbin? We've got 3, 7, 15, 18, 24. 24 to 3 makes it an 8 to 1. 8 to 1 on the assault table puts us on the 7 to 1 column. The 7 to 1 column, the Soviets will take the hex. If they roll a 1, they would lose a unit, which would not be cool. So I think we may play it safe. The last thing we want to do is end up having this little border conflict cost the Soviets anything, if at all possible. So I think we will, even though this is going to probably bring it to a screeching halt here, we will go ahead and have Zhukov provide offensive HQ support. That's going to give the Soviets a +1, so it'll make it a 7 to 1 +1. That guarantees no losses for the Soviets, and that they will take the hex. The question is, will half of them be turned face down with Zhukov, or will everyone get to remain face up? So let's see what the roll says here. That's a 10. That's a no-brainer. Didn't even need to burn Zhukov, so the Soviets getting a little taste of what the Japanese ran into down there at Nanking. That is a asterisk 2S. So going back to Harbin, that will kill the militia. Everyone will remain face up. No losses for the Soviets. We are going to have, I think, Zhukov and the 4-3 enter there. That will at least put Zhukov in a position to where he can supply at least maybe a 1-hex attack here, but I don't think they're going to. I don't think the Soviets are going to get too much further than that this turn. There's no air rebases and no reorganization, which means we are looking at the end of turn die roll, which is a 1, and it is, wow, it's another 10. I think that's maybe three 10s in a row with this die. That's getting pretty hot. I've rolled weather for this next set of impulses, and the roll was a 1. We had a +1 from the weather result last time we rolled, which made it a net 2 on the weather chart. For July, August, that's going to give us fine weather everywhere except North Monsoon, where the storm is going to revert to rain. So not a big change in weather anywhere, and of course there won't be any die roll modifiers to the next weather roll, which may prove important for the upcoming September-October turn if we end up ending the July-August turn in this set of impulses, which may happen. There's still a fairly low chance of it happening, but it is increasing with each passing impulse. We're going to start with the fascists here in Europe, and again, it's Spain where really any activity at all is going on. So we're going to go right to our land moves. They're going to slide the garrison division there into Madrid, and I really think that's about it. So looking at the forces here in the east, the Nationalists don't have quite what they would like to have in order to have at least a decent chance of killing some Republican units here. They don't mind taking losses. They're not necessarily looking for the big overpowering attack. They're more than happy at this point to get into an attritional 1-for-1 exchange of forces, because the Republicans will not be able to replace their troops nearly as quickly as the Nationalists can, but they also don't want to just throw away their troops unnecessarily. And quite honestly, the 1-to-1 assault, the 1-to-1 column on the assault table is pretty brutal for the attackers. There's only a 40% chance, without any positive DRMs, of inflicting any losses at all on the defenders. So I think Franco is going to be content to wait until September, October. There should be good weather here throughout the next turn in Spain. So once he gets the forces here north of Madrid reorganized and into position here for essentially what will turn into a gigantic siege of Valencia in eastern Spain, will hopefully, for the Nationalists, from the Nationalist point of view, hopefully be the final stage of this civil war. The Germans really have positioned everything they are looking to position where it needs to be for whatever they may have in mind for the rest of the year. And the Italians, again, are content to kind of sit pat. So if we go out to Asia, we're back to the Japanese now. And we looked at this a little more closely last impulse, the opportunities they have maybe here or with Chang. And again, I think it's more a case of being patient for the Japanese and not rushing into some mediocre attacks that could end up doing more long-term damage than they could any immediate gain. So with that, the turn does seem to be slowing down. The fascists who have the initiative, aside from the communists who are marching through Manchuria, are kind of slowing down, and we're seeing the turn kind of peter out a bit. And like I said, the only exception to that really is the communists, who will be up after the Democrats, who come up next. I don't know that there's going to be a lot to show you other than what the communists are doing. So the fascists, I think, are done for now, and we'll come over here and we'll do the end of turn die roll, since now we've reached a point where a 2 or less without modification will end the turn. Let's see what happens here. And we get an 8, so that means the Democrats are up. The Democrats, everybody but China passed 2 impulses ago. Everybody, including China, passed last impulse. Nothing that the fascists have done has really changed anything on the board, so we're going to see the Democrats pass yet again. And since everybody's passing, that's going to be a -2 to the roll, and it's still a base 2 for the end of roll, so a -2 means a 4 or less on the die will in fact end the turn. And we get another 8, which means we are on to the communists. So now let's go take a look and see what the Soviets can do over in Manchuria. Again, this is probably going to be a rather abbreviated impulse for the Soviets. They are restricted to a combined impulse. They've got no air units in theater to speak of. They aren't going to be bringing any into the theater either, especially this late in the turn. There's no real naval activity, so we can kind of skip forward and just focus on the land movement. They do get 5 land moves, and that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, and I guess we'll bring this guy in here for 5. And as you can see, there's no possibility of any combat, no air rebases or reorganization, which is going to wrap up a rather quick communist impulse. Now, the end of turn die roll remains a 2. This will be the last, I believe, impulse where that is the case. So if the communists roll a 2, that's going to wrap up the turn. And they do not. They roll a 5. So the turn continues. I will go ahead and roll the weather. Again, there's really not going to be much to see. In fact, the fascists may end up deciding to pass, if only to prevent the communists from doing much more damage there in Manchuria. We shall see. Let me go ahead and take care of the weather, look things over, and pick back up when and if something of interest starts to happen. Well, the weather roll for this very next set of impulses was another 1, which actually improved the weather to where it is fine everywhere. And with the rain and storms finally abating here in the North Monsoon, Japanese see a potential opportunity here, maybe to poke a hole in this Chinese defense line. And what we're going to do is jump right in there. They had no naval movement, no naval activity to speak of, no ground strike missions or rail movement. They really don't even have any land movement. So we're actually going no air transport, no debark of land units, invasions, or paradrops. We're going all the way to the land combat step because what we have is already in place. The Japanese are going to attack the Kunming militia here in the mountains with the units in these 3 hexes. And what we have is a defense of 2, which is doubled for the mountains to 4. The attacking factors are 5, 10, 11, 15. But they are going to fly a ground support mission, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That's going to raise the attack factors to 16 to 4, which comes down to a 4 to 1. Now the Chinese have a decision to make. If they go on the 4 to 1, if they go on the blitz table, there's a small chance, 30% chance they can, well actually a 20% chance of saving the unit, but a much greater chance of leaving all the attackers face up. So they're going to stick with their tried and true strategy thus far of selecting the assault table and trying to bleed the Japanese as they fight for every hex in China. Let's go ahead and we'll rebase the Nell bombers here. And a 4 to 1 on the assault table. Now the Japanese do have a little bit of risk here. If they roll a 1, they will fail to take the hex and inflict any casualties, and they will suffer 1 themselves. If they roll a 2, they will kill the Chinese defenders, but they'll suffer 2 losses, which I think would be worse than rolling a 1. So the Japanese would like a 3 or better, and they certainly want to avoid a 2. So let's see what they can do here on this late attack along the southern line. They roll an 8, which is a very good roll again, and that 8 on a 4 to 1 is going to be a cross/2S. So no losses for the Japanese. Half of the attackers will remain face up while they inflict 2 losses and shatter the remaining defenders. So that means the lone militia here is going to be destroyed. He'll go back into the force pool, and it's a matter of advancing into the hex if they so desire, which I think they definitely do. The question is which one. I think the Osaka militia here is the obvious one. Now, since the movement point cost is 4 and that exceeds their movement, they will be turned face down, and then of the others we'll need 2 to remain face up. So we'll turn the garrison division there face down. So now things look a little bit trickier for the Chinese here in the south. We've got no air bases and no reorganization for the Japanese. Meanwhile, over in Europe, the European fascists, including the Spanish nationalists, are really not doing anything. So we're right on to the end of turn die roll at this point, and it has increased to a 3. So a 3 or less and the turn will end. And as yet another 10. So the turn continues, and the box will move up 1 on the initiative track, and we're over to the Democrats. Well, that last Japanese attack has created a worrying development for the Chinese here in the south. They had counted on the bad weather that normally plagues the North Monsoon Zone in the summertime to really kind of shut down that front, and thought they could get away with a very thin defense line down there. But with the sudden break in the weather, the Japanese were able to capitalize on that, and they now have created a little bit of a hole here. And the big problem is the Chinese really don't have any reserves in the area to plug the gap. What they're going to, I think, have to rely on is getting some reinforcements at the end or at the beginning of next turn, and then hopefully the Democrats will beat the fascists on the initiative rolls, and they'll be able to slide somebody into the hex here. Otherwise, things could get a little tricky there in the south. Now, it's not necessarily the end of the world, because we do have this mountain line here, and the Japanese are going to have to march over those mountains in order to start to exploit this gap. But still, it'll be very inconvenient if the Japanese can seize this hex. So I think the Chinese are going to, like I said, just trust in the initiative roll at this point and whatever reinforcements they may be able to scrounge up at the beginning of next turn. So the other Democrats are again content to pass. I think the Chinese will pass as well. So that's going to take the end of turn die roll, which is a 3. We're going to subtract 2 from the die for everyone passing, which means a 5 or less will end the turn here. Let's see what happens. A 7. So this turn is going on quite a while. That's going to make the communists happy, I think, as they are up next. And again, this is going to be very similar to the last communist impulse. They've got some land moves here. I think they're going to slide the armor there. They'll move the infantry there, bring up the cavalry, and yeah, I think that's going to do it. The communists now are also looking at a, well, the end of turn roll has increased to a 4 now, even though they have not passed. So a 4 or less will now end the turn. And we finally ended on a 1. So that's going to wrap up July, August, except for the production. We'll get the end of turn things out of the way, the partisan roll, U.S. entry, return to base, final reorg, all that good stuff. And once that's taken care of and we've got the builds done, we'll go ahead and show you what everybody's going to be producing. So we'll pick back up here in just a few minutes. One quick thing I did want to bring up before we get on to production is the border war here in Manchuria. According to the Russian option 9, after this turn, or at the end of this turn, the war lapses. And so Japan and the Soviets are now at peace again. I can't find any direct reference to lapse of war in the collector's edition rule sets. In earlier rule sets, it talked about when units are in the other country's hexes and the war lapses, that they'll be moved back to the nearest controlled hex. But the closest I could find is in the peace section, 13.7, the mutual peace and neutrality rule section. I'm going to be guided by that in this instance. So what that says, or at least the applicable part of that rule section, is that units that are now in the other nations' hexes are removed from the map and placed 2 turns ahead on the reinforcement circle to arrive as reinforcements. So that's going to include this cluster of Soviet troops here. It's Zhukov, 2 infantry armies, the cavalry corps, the cavalry division, and the mechanized army. So those will all go over onto the spiral to arrive back on map in November, December 1939. So with that resolved, also the results of the little incursion here, not only was the Harbin militia unit destroyed, but the Soviets did gain control of this resource, which they're not able to use in production, but it will deny the Japanese the use of that resource in this upcoming production phase. So that said, let's go ahead and take a look and see what everyone has built. Running through the partisan die roll resulted in no effect anywhere. No partisans appeared on the maps. U.S. entry, there were 3 rolls made on the War with Democrat table for the Japanese actions in China. We get 1 roll each turn, and then there was 1 roll for each city they captured. They captured Shanghai and Nanking. And while they did get a +1 on one of the rolls, they got a -1 on another one, which offset that. And then the third roll was not very good. It was a 0. So no change in U.S. entry due to the War with Democrat rolls, which obviously China is not too happy about. Moving on to production, there were no changes really in anyone's production. The Japanese did lose the use of the one of the Manchurian resources, but that didn't impact her final build point total due to the production multiple and rounding. So what we have, we'll start off looking at the axis like we always do. The Italians, the biggest constraint on everyone really this turn for building was the fact that they had all been fairly deeply in debt for political options that they have been taking recently. So everyone's production was fairly muted this turn. The Italians spent a whopping 2 build points to build a fighter. That'll show up in a couple of turns. The Germans did spend a total of 7 build points. They're going to build an infantry division and a single-engine fighter, as well as a twin-engine fighter. And again, that's a total of 7. The Japanese also spent 7. They built a convoy point. 1, 2, 3, 4. They built the first cycle of a transport. They built a Marine division as well as a militia unit. Moving on to the Communists. The Communists, USSR, built a total of 6, and that is going to be spent on a 1, 2, 3, a motorized corps and a single-engine fighter. The stack you see here, these are the units that were in Manchuria. They should actually only be 2 turns ahead, so I'll move them here to November, December. And then moving on to the Democrats, we'll start with France. France spent a grand total of 4 build points, and they produced a mountain corps. They'll take 3 turns to arrive here. The Commonwealth, which was fairly deeply in debt, even though they have an 11 production this turn, they only spent 2 of them, and this is all leaving many of the powers right at 0 build points or 0 money in the bank. They did begin the second cycle of HMS Formidable, and they built a CVP, a carrier plane. The cost is 2, which you will subtract 2 because we're using the pilot option, so that's actually a 0 cost carrier plane, which is how they were able to build that. China spent 3 to build an infantry corps. That'll show up here in a couple of turns. And then finally, the United States started the second cycle on the USS St. Louis, and that's going to cost them 1 build point. Remember, the U.S. recently geared up, and that was an expensive gear up, so they were fairly heavily in debt, and this is going to get them almost to the black here. Now, as far as Spain goes, the Republicans, the production differential now is 11-2 in favor of the Nationalists, and the Nationalists spent 2 of their build points on a fighter because the rest of their force pool is empty. So they're all of the Nationalist forces that are in the game are now either on map or on the production circle. As far as the Republicans go, they do have a handful of units, including 1 air unit, in their force pool. The problem is they don't have enough build points to build any of them. So unless they get some financial assistance from somebody else, one of the major powers, they are not going to be able to add any more troops to what they have on the board and on the production circle already. So that's not good news for the Republicans. And I think on that rather dour note for the Republican Spaniards, we'll probably go ahead and wrap up this episode that is going to bring us to the end of July-August 1939. We saw a brief skirmish out in Asia, and we saw the fall of Madrid after a couple of years here by the Spanish Nationalists. So as we advance here into September, October, we'll be picking up with the political phase, and we'll see what developments lay in store for the rest of 1939. That's going to do it for today. Thanks again for watching. Take care.